Hello. Um, this is the perfect opportunity for me to have stage fright. Yeah, this is the perfect opportunity for me to have stage fright while being on my own in my weird office thing. Um, uh, so let me explain before I tell you who I am and all of the things that I'm going to talk about. Let me explain the situation here. I am resting my computer on a stack of cards, like literally like playing cards, like 5 stacks of playing cards that are elevating my computer. And I am also looking at my phone, which is on my computer, stuck to the monitor with a bit of blue tack, and is in a very, very precarious position. So if at any point this falls over, or this falls over, or this falls over, I shall make them upright. Promise. Hello and welcome to an episode of the wonderful King's Head Theatre Online sessions. Thanks so much to King's Head Theatre for inviting me to hold one of these sessions. It's very strange to go from working in a building with hundreds of people all day to being stuck at home, and this feels a little bit like I am not just stuck at home. And thanks to the King's Head Theatre for doing this in general. It's an amazing thing to do to maintain all of the community that a space brings outside of a literal space and in a virtual space. And thank you for joining us and joining me and listening to me talk a little bit about myself and about what I do, which is teaching writers. If any of my former or current students are here, this is a bit of a cheat because you'll know all the things that I don't tell you about what I do when I work with you. But yeah, well, maybe you can use this to get the best of me or get the better of me. Those are two different things, aren't they? Yes. So, by the way, you can all comment or you can interact. You can ask any questions that you want. I will hopefully see it and answer it. You can ask questions on Facebook, and I assume you can ask questions on Instagram as well. So let's start with me. Yes, me. I am Dr. I've done that. They can't take it away from me. I am Dr. Farokh Soltani. And what I do is I am a lecturer in writing for broadcast media and performance at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, University of London. What that basically means is that I teach writers. And I don't teach writers in the sense of working in a writers group or working in a young writers program, which would entail a lot of young people who sort of know how to write, writing things, and me giving them feedback to make sure that they are writing the right thing. I am a pedagogue. My actual job is to teach told you. Yay. Teach students how to the blue tack has come off. Teach students how to engage with writing, and to give them a set of skills. So I do not work for the students' work. I do not work for the script. My process isn't supposed to make the student write an awesome script. My process is supposed to make the student aware of their own writing skills and aware of their own writer's voice. And I think that's something that both distinguishes my practice from just working in a writers group, and also distinguishes distinguishes the problems that I face problems that I faced in comparison with someone who is working in a writers group. So what I'm going to do during the next 20 minutes or so is I'm going to tell you a little bit about the development of my practice, the development of my pedagogical teaching practice, and also some of the key problems that I faced, which I'm going to unpack through talking about some critical incidents, some moments that I had through my practice with specific students at very specific times that made me realize how difficult it is to teach writing. And even though I've been doing it for, 5 or 6 years, and every year I've been working for about 100 writers, working in an academic setting, I don't know whether I've got the right solutions. What I know, though, and what I'm trying to, what I will try to tell you in the next few minutes, is that I think I've now found the right questions. So let me tell you a little bit about how I came to be a writing pedagogue. I have a background in writing myself. I used to be a television writer in my home country of Iran. I used to have a quite up-and-coming career, and I also had a background, an educational background in writing, in that I went to one of Iran's 2 universities for cinema at the time, and I graduated as a Bachelor of Fine Art in screenwriting. It's a cool thing. And I don't really remember anything about my university years. Well, I remember a lot of what I did. I don't remember anything from the classes, which I've always found disturbing. It was 5 years of my life. And then I came to this country, for those of you who are not in this country, because who exists anywhere anymore, I'm talking about Britain. I came to Britain and I started to study for a master's in writing for stage and broadcast media. That is the master's on which I now teach. Hey. Everything comes full circle. And then suddenly I realized that I was learning completely differently, despite the fact that I was basically learning the same things. I was learning about dramatic action, about characterization, about how to use settings, and so on. And still, it seemed to me like I'd changed the way that I learn. I suddenly started to see everything in a different perspective. And I sort of became obsessed with finding what had happened, finding what had suddenly allowed me to teach and allowed me to learn differently. So I basically started doing a PhD research project just so that I could try my hand at teaching. And the first thing that I discovered when I tried to teach what I had done for years, which was dramatic writing, I realized that there is a really, really big problem. There's a really big obstacle in my way, which is that I am trying to teach people something that they should not do the way that I do. Let me unpack that a little bit. I firmly believe, and I hope you all agree with me, that if a piece of writing could be written by anyone, then it's probably not going to be a great piece of writing. If a piece of writing doesn't bear anything from its writer, if it's just, you know, a generic thing that doesn't have any relation to anything individual, then it's probably not going to be great. It's literally going to be cliche, right? So, told you. Stay there. No, stay there. So when a writer tries to learn writing, if I teach them my writing, then obviously I have failed to teach them writing, because they are at best going to produce the thing that I would have produced. So any attempt at teaching people how I write is going to end up blocking the way that they write. And this is something that I can back theoretically, because I'm an academic. So in the 1970s and 1980s, there were a group of researchers who were trying to understand what is it that makes us think of something as creative. What is it that you look at two paintings and one is, yeah, it's okay, but one is, oh, that's really creative. So a man called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and I know how to spell that, and his colleague, Dr. Getzels, did a widespread research of art students by first collecting a group of artworks from students, giving them to a group of random people to judge, and they measured the creativity that was socially perceived in these objects. And they located all of the ones that people thought were really creative. First thing they noticed was that the understanding of how creative a piece is actually quite socially socially homogeneous, in that the pieces that people identified as being creative weren't that different. So, like, there wasn't like 5 people identify this, 5 people identify this. It was 90 people think that this is creative. No one thinks that this is creative. The second thing that they realized when they went and talked to the people who were judged to be creative, and compared their practice to the people who weren't judged to be creative, what they realized was that the judgment of creativity had nothing to do with the creative solutions that had been implemented. That is, if someone wanted to draw a vase, right, there's a clear creative solution to that. You do this, you do this, you do this. That was a vase. So they realized that solutions are taught. How do you do this? You do it this way. That's a solution teaching. The thing that identified people as creative wasn't that they knew how to do solutions, it was that they could find problems that other people could not. And that was the key thing. That was the key difference. So creativity is not about finding a good solution, because solutions can always be taught. Creativity is judged by problem finding. And problem finding is something that isn't taught as easily. Because I can tell you how to write in response to a problem. I cannot tell you what problem you should choose to write about. I cannot tell you how to identify the problem that dramatic writing would be a solution to, right? Because the moment I do that, I am giving you my problem, and that makes you inherently less creative. Let me tell you an example. I was the first ever student that I taught, and I taught him one-to-one. Sorry, English is not my first language. It's a miracle I can do this, right? I taught him one-to-one, partly in order to get the hang of teaching writing. And he was a very, very creative young man, and he was writing this really strange play about a journalist who suddenly discovers a massive conspiracy at the heart of the government, which was it was a really interesting. I'm not going to tell you what made it cool because copyright and all that, but it was a really cool idea. And as I and it was just very badly written in that there was no story, there was no action. Scenes didn't really have a logical link together. It didn't flow well. So I could give him pointers on how to make this really dramatic. But the weird thing that happened was that the moment it got dramatic, it stopped being interesting, because the solutions that I had proposed were all solutions that I could have thought of. The problems that I'd found in this, the problems that I'd proposed the student to solve were my problems. So I would say, this scene for me does not work because I don't see why this man would do this. So can you see that what I'm trying to do is I'm saying the problem that you have identified and are solving in this scene are not problems that I know of. So in a nutshell, the biggest problem that I've had with pedagogy and writing is, how can I teach people how to write without giving them the problem? Because I can give them the solution, I can give them technique, I can give them a general dramatic structure to follow. But then, the way that I've learned those is that I read a book. There was no magic solution to me learning. It was that I learned a book, and those structures were in that book. And in fact, by the way, to go back to where I came into this, I read that book 20 years ago in Iran. It didn't make sense to me until I came to this country and was in a different educational environment. So what the hell do I do? What the hell do I do to teach my students to find their own problems? One school of thought says, nothing. You don't do anything. there is a school of thought that basically says writing is this God-given talent that just you find yourself inspired by and you cannot control. I don't subscribe to that view. So I don't think that there isn't a way there. I don't think that my student would benefit from me not teaching them. And then I found this. Okay, I'll be very honest with you. I got. Oh, sorry. I got one day. I got a tiny little bit drunk. And I shouldn't say that because, you know, role model and all that. But I sat down and I kept thinking about this and kept talking to myself about this while I was watching a speech, a conference by the writer Charlie Kaufman, who's one of my all-time favorite writers. And then at some point, there was something that I caught in his speech that I wrote down that I think just changed my life completely and changed the way that I teach completely, which was that there is a difference between knowing how to write and knowing how to be a writer, which is a really cool thing, right? I actually went back and listened to it when I got a bit sober. He doesn't say that, so I don't know what I heard that I interpreted as this, but I'm keeping that. I'm keeping the copyright for this. So yeah, he said, well, my brain thought he said that the way to write, that is writing technique, and the way to be a writer, that is problem finding, and knowing what to write, and knowing what to write that is yours, are two different things. And I think that since I made this discovery, my pedagogical practice has been focused on figuring out how to teach writers to be writers. Not just to write, which is in the books, but to be writers, which I think is a different kind of teaching. It's a different kind of pedagogy. It does not involve the transfer or propagation or correction of information, right? I can teach you how to write by telling you this is dramatic action. This is dramatic action. This is characterization. That's the way to write. But I can't. That's not a great achievement. But the way to be a writer involves being with your student and being there for your student. Because being a writer, the first thing that being a writer is difficult. I've been told not to swear. I haven't been told not to swear, but I assume I shouldn't swear. But so I would have sworn at that point. Being a writer is difficult. Being a writer is difficult because you don't know the solution, because you don't know what problem to go for. Figuring out what to write is an existential crisis. So my job as a teacher is really not to say, there is a solution to that crisis. This is the way you should do that bit. My job is to sit with my students and say, I know this is difficult. This is painful. Writing is painful. You have to make choices. No one is going to help you make those choices. So in many ways, writing pedagogy for me doesn't really require uh, a thorough knowledge of the solutions of writing. It's more like therapy. It's um, uh, more like uh, a life coach, someone who tells you that even though you don't know what to do, you know what to do because only you can know what to do. Otherwise, I would just be making copies of myself. And, Agatha Christie's already done that. By the way, we're getting to the 25-minute mark. So this is going to end in 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions, anyone has any comments, please send them my way. I'm going to try and read them and try and answer them. And I'm going to try and figure out how technology works, which is quite tricky. Another thing that I have struggled. If any questions comes, I will answer. But another thing that I've struggled with is the rigidity of some of the styles of teaching writers, which is which assumes that there is only one way to be a writer. Hello, Jack. There is only one way to be a writer. And I don't know whether that is helpful at all or not. Because another thing that we are encouraged to do in academia and in writing pedagogy is to instill discipline in writers. And again, that is something that I struggled with. I give my writers deadlines all the time. But I don't know whether that's helpful. I've been, so if you read educational material on writing, one thing that everyone says is you should write every day. And I tell my student to write every day. I don't know if that's any of any help. Because I would say that, again, every writer writes differently. And every writer has different triggers and different practices of writing. Another thing that I've discovered throughout teaching pedagogy is that writing is not an intellectual task. Writing isn't figuring out what to write. Writing isn't thinking about the thing that you want to write and then writing it. Writing is actually quite an embodied act. You put your body at a point where it transfers what's in your head to what's on paper. And if you cannot, even if you know exactly what you want to write, the moment that you sit down, this is no longer about what you know. This is no longer about what you think. It is about what you do. Writing is an act. It is not an intellectual pursuit. It's a bodily, active pursuit. And so, another thing that I tell my students, another way in which I try to be a pedagogue for my students, is to tell them that the way that they write is okay if that's the only way that they can write. Rather than telling them to change the way that they write, which might just stop them from writing the way that they write and make them write the way that I write, is to figure out what kind of writer they are. Are they the kind of writer who works only at the last minute, and there's loads of them? Perfectly fine. Just know yourself as a writer and mitigate your practice as a writer. We've got about 1 more minute left. Is there any questions? Is there any comments I would love to respond to? But if not, well, thanks everyone for joining. It's good to it's good to know that. Oh, what was the cool slogan? It's good to know that we are distant but not disconnected. So thank you, people of the internet world, or as it is known nowadays, the world. Um, I hope that bit of out loud thinking about pedagogy might come in handy one day, sometime. My pleasure, Steph. Um, Remember, by the way, that KHTOnline is on every weekday at 1 p.m. Live on Facebook and Instagram. Please check out the King's Head Theatre website or socials for details of other sessions. They will be announced every day. Yes, for those of you, by the way, who are writers who are watching this, you're okay. Don't let anyone tell you that the way that you write isn't the way that you should write. Check out King's Head Theatre. This is an amazing thing that they do, and hopefully continue to do until someone switches the virus back off. I don't know who pressed that button, but oh, please don't let this become a conspiracy theory. That was a joke. And thank you for joining me, and thank you for listening. And I am now going to try and figure out how to turn this off. Is this the way? No. This is the way. Bye-bye. Oh, this is the way as well. Bye-bye. Oh, hasn't ended.